Hidden in the pages of Genesis lies a story so unsettling that scholars still wrestle with it today. A man, caught between duty and desire, thought he could outsmart both family and faith. He made one secret choice in the shadows, and God ended his life. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a warrior. He was just one man, yet his name is remembered forever, not for greatness but for judgment. Was this about family duty? Was it about rebellion? Or was it something far deeper, a lesson meant for every generation? Stay with me until the end, because once you hear this story, you'll never look at the Bible the same way again. To understand this mysterious account, we must step back nearly 4,000 years, into the age of the patriarchs. This was the world of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their children, a time when families were more than households. They were tribes. They were nations in the making. In this ancient culture, one's name and descendants were everything. To leave behind no children was considered a tragedy. It meant your memory could vanish, your inheritance scattered, your line forgotten. For them, survival was tied to honor, and honor was tied to family legacy. Judah, one of Jacob's 12 sons, was raising his own family in the land of Canaan. Scripture tells us that he had 3 sons, Er, Onan, and Shelah. As was custom, his eldest son, Er, married a young woman named Tamar. She became part of Judah's household, bound by covenant and by duty to carry on his family's name. But suddenly, tragedy struck. Er, Judah's firstborn, died young. The details of his wrongdoing are brief in the text, only that he was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God ended his life. Tamar was left widowed, childless, and vulnerable. In the culture of that time, this created a serious crisis. Without children, Tamar's future would be uncertain. She could be left without protection, without provision, without legacy. But there was a solution written into the traditions of the ancient world, one that would later be recorded in the Law of Moses. It was called the Family Duty Law, later formalized in Deuteronomy 25 verses 5 to 10. If a man died without children, his brother was expected to marry the widow. The first son born from this union would carry the name of the deceased brother. In this way, the family line would not be cut off, and the widow would have security for her future. This practice might sound strange to modern ears, but to them it was sacred. It was about loyalty, about responsibility, and about keeping the promises of God alive through the generations. And so, with Er gone, the responsibility now shifted to his younger brother, Onan. The weight on his shoulders was immense. He was not simply asked to step into a personal duty. He was asked to uphold the very covenant God had made with his family. This wasn't just about Tamar. It wasn't just about Judah's household. It was about the future of the chosen people and the line through which God's promises would unfold. The question was simple. Would Onan fulfill his role, or would he resist it? It is here, in this moment of choice, that one man's heart is tested, and the result will echo through history. If you believe family duty should never be abandoned, hit subscribe now. Don't just watch history. Be part of keeping it alive. Now the responsibility fell to Onan, the second son of Judah. The command from his father was not optional. It was a direct charge. Go to your brother's wife and fulfill your duty, so that your brother's name may not disappear from Israel. Tamar waited in silence. She was young. She was widowed. She had no children, no voice in her future. In the culture of the day, her security depended on the faithfulness of the men in her household. Without children, she faced loneliness, rejection, and the possibility of being cast aside. Her hope rested entirely on whether Onan would act honorably. But Onan's heart was divided. On the outside, he appeared obedient. He stepped into the role. He gave the impression of compliance. But inside, a war raged. Onan knew the truth. If Tamar had a child, that child would not be counted as his. It would be considered the heir of his deceased brother, Er. The family inheritance would shift. His own share would shrink. His place in the household would be less secure. And so he began to scheme. Each time he was with Tamar, he deliberately ensured she could not conceive. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't hesitation. It was intentional avoidance. He wanted the closeness but not the responsibility. He wanted the appearance of duty, but none of the sacrifice. In plain words, Onan wanted the benefit without the cost. And this deception ran deep. To Tamar, it was betrayal. She longed for the security of children, yet she was denied again and again. To Judah, it was defiance. He had entrusted his son with a sacred duty, only to watch it mocked. To his deceased brother, it was dishonor, the extinguishing of his name and his legacy. But above all, this was rebellion against God. The covenant promise that began with Abraham, passed down through Isaac and Jacob, was tied to this family. From this line, generations later, the Messiah himself would come. Onan's actions were not simply personal choices. They were attempts to cut off the very line God had chosen for redemption. Think about that. A single man's selfish choice was standing in the way of God's greater plan. And for a time, Onan thought he had hidden it well. Night after night, he played the part. To others, he looked faithful. To himself, he felt clever. But the truth is this: no one hides from God. This act of defiance would not go unnoticed. The silence of heaven was not approval. It was patience. A patience that was about to end. What do you think? Was Onan guilty of immorality, or was it selfish rebellion? Comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Onan's decision was not a single moment of weakness. It became a pattern. Each time he went to Tamar, he made sure that she would never conceive a child. The ancient Hebrew text describes his actions in a way that makes it clear this was not an accident. It was deliberate. It was repeated. It was planned. Onan was not confused. He knew exactly what he was doing. Why? His motives are revealed between the lines. First, greed. If Tamar gave birth, the child would carry the name of heir, Onan's deceased brother. That meant a share of the family inheritance would go to that child, not to Onan. He did not want to divide what he believed should be his. Second, pride. He wanted recognition and honor for himself. Raising a child who would be counted as another man's heir was, to him, a humiliation. Third, rebellion. This was not just about family. It was about God's covenant. The promise of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was that through this line, the world would be blessed. Onan was standing in the way of that purpose. And so, night after night, he lived in deception. To Tamar, it was betrayal. She trusted him, depended on him, and he denied her the very thing she needed most. To his father Judah, it was hypocrisy. Onan pretended to obey, but in reality, he mocked his father's command. To himself, it was a clever plan. He thought he had found a way to take the benefits of closeness without the weight of responsibility. And for a while, it seemed to work. Each night passed without consequence. Each morning came with no sign of judgment. Onan began to believe he had gotten away with it. No punishment, no exposure, only a hidden choice, a secret he thought no one else could see. But here is the truth. No one hides from God. The silence of heaven was not approval. It was mercy, mercy that was running out. Would you risk everything for selfish comfort? Or would you hold on to faith even when it costs you? If you believe faith matters more than desire, type the word faith in the comments right now. And then the silence ended. Genesis 38 verse 10 records it in the plainest of words. What Onan did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord took his life also. Just like that, it was over. No warning. No second chance. No slow decline. One moment Onan lived, the next he was gone. This is one of the rare times in Scripture where God's judgment falls instantly on a single individual. Think about that. Even in the wilderness, when Israel grumbled, judgment often came as a plague, as fire, or through time. Even kings who sinned were sometimes given years before they saw consequences. But not Onan. Why so sudden? Why so severe? The text leaves no room for doubt. What he did was evil in God's eyes. Not merely because of family dishonor. Not merely because of personal selfishness. But because his actions struck at the very heart of God's covenant plan. Remember, this was not just any family. This was Judah's line. And from Judah's line would one day come David. And from David's line, the Messiah. Onan wasn't just refusing responsibility to Tamar. He was interfering with the divine plan of redemption itself. And so, what began as a private choice ended as a public judgment. What seemed hidden in the dark was suddenly exposed before heaven. One man's secret became a warning written into scripture for all generations. It is a sobering truth. Onan is remembered not for greatness, not for courage, not for faith, but for rebellion. His story has only a handful of verses, yet it echoes across centuries. Why? Because it reminds us that God sees the heart. He sees beyond appearances, beyond outward obedience, beyond pretense. Onan thought he could fool his family. He thought he could use Tamar without honoring her. He thought he could take the blessings while rejecting the cost. But God is not mocked. One man's hidden act brought a legacy of shame. One selfish choice left a permanent mark in history. And it forces us to ask, what hidden things are we carrying, believing no one will ever know? If you believe hidden choices still matter today, hit subscribe right now. Don't be the one who ignores the warnings of history. Tamar's story did not end with Onan's betrayal. She had been left widowed once, and then betrayed again by a man who chose selfishness over responsibility. She was still without children, still vulnerable, still dependent on a household that had failed her. But Tamar refused to be erased. She waited, watching as Judah hesitated to give her his third son, Shelah, when he came of age. Promises were made, but never kept. Time passed, and Tamar remained childless. And so, in desperation, she took a bold step. Scripture tells us that Tamar disguised herself, concealing her identity, and placed herself in Judah's path. In doing so, she secured what was denied to her, a chance to continue the family line. It was a shocking and daring move, and yet out of it came two sons, Perez and Zerah. Now here is the astonishing twist. Out of this broken and painful story, God's greater plan still moved forward. Perez, Tamar's son, would grow to carry Judah's line forward, and generations later, from Perez would come King David. And from David, centuries after, would come the Messiah himself, Jesus Christ. Think about that. The man who rejected his duty, Onan, was struck down and remembered only for shame. But the woman he wronged, Tamar, became part of the greatest redemption story ever told. It is as though the message is written across the pages of Genesis. One man's rebellion could not stop God's covenant. One man's selfishness could not cancel the plan of salvation. What Onan refused in defiance, God restored through grace. This is not only Tamar's victory, it is God's victory. It is proof that his promises do not fail, even when people do. The story of Onan ends in disgrace, but the story of Tamar continues in glory, woven into the lineage of Christ himself. It is here that we see the lesson most clearly. God takes covenant seriously. He takes responsibility seriously. He takes integrity seriously. Onan died in shame, but Tamar lived on in God's redemption story. Onan's story is brief, only a handful of verses, and yet it has echoed through thousands of years. It is shocking, it is uncomfortable, and it is unforgettable. He is remembered not for greatness, not for faith, not for courage, but for what he refused to do. Onan wanted the appearance of obedience without the heart behind it. He wanted the comfort of closeness without the weight of commitment. He wanted the blessing without the sacrifice. And so his name was written into Scripture not as a hero, but as a warning. His life asks us a haunting question, one that still speaks across the centuries. What are we doing in secret, believing no one will ever know? That could cost us everything. We often live as if hidden choices are harmless, as if compromise will never be noticed, as if responsibility can be pushed aside without consequence. But Onan's story whispers to us, no, nothing is hidden forever. God sees, God knows, and God takes covenant, integrity, and responsibility seriously. He was only one man, and yet, his fall became a lesson for every generation that followed. If you believe this ancient story still speaks today, subscribe now. Don't scroll past. Don't ignore it. If you disagree, tell me in the comments. Was Onan's punishment fair? Or was it too severe? I want to hear what you think. And here is the final question I leave with you. Would you have chosen differently in Onan's place? Or would you have fallen into the same mistake? The choice in every generation remains the same.